Alright, hey guys, and welcome back to another video for my top 10 games of the decade. Now, I'm going to be filling in these blank spots here on the left in just a little bit, but first let me just give you a brief history on how I had a method for coming up with this, and it wasn't just a quick thrown together list of top 10 games. I've put in quite a bit of hours to come up with this list. I spent about 11 hours going through every game released between 2010 and 2019, and I made an initial list of games, pretty much anything that I enjoyed playing, had fun with. I'm like, okay, this probably is never going to make top 10, but I'm going to put it on here anyway. There were a couple of rules, such as I felt that I didn't necessarily have to completely finish a game for it to be considered, but I at least had to put in a significant amount of hours or a certain percentage through the game in order to consider it, so keep that in mind. A lot of your favorite games that you think should be on this list are definitely not going to be on this list, okay? Just a warning. There are some choices on here that are going to be kind of shocking and maybe even controversial, but it's a PeteDorr list, so you should kind of expect that going in. So what do you say we get started with number 10? And that is... Come on, show. There we go. It is Sonic and Sega AllStars Racing. This was a multi-platform game, and this one I felt really good about putting on this list, mostly because I still play this game today. I still play it, I still love it, I speedrun it now, it still looks as amazing as it did back then, and because this game has made my top 10 of this decade, or past decade rather, I'm pretty confident in saying that this is the best racing game that I've played in the past 10 years. Spoiler, there's no more racing games above this one. I really believe that this is sort of the pinnacle of kart racers, and yes, there were sequels that followed, such as Transformed and Team Sonic Racing, but they never quite matched the same magic as the original Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. It was pure, it was simple, there were no gimmicks, the speed was fast, the controls were perfect, the drifting felt so good, the track designs were creative, they were very, very different from one to the next, and in my opinion, many of the tracks featured in this game rival and exceed the best Mario Kart tracks in the history of that series, and I know that's going to upset some Mario Kart fans. I still love my Mario Kart, but I have to give love to what I consider to be one of my favorite racing games of all time. If you've never played it, get it on Steam and have some fun with it. It's an amazing kart racer. Okay, moving on to what is probably the most controversial pick in this list, and believe me, I did not put this in here just to stir the pot here in YouTube comments. I really poured over this one and decided that yes, it needs to be included. Reba crane game. This is, first of all, before you're like, that's not a video game, so let me break down what this game is for you if you've never heard it. And this is going to sound like an advertisement, but believe me, it is not, okay? Anybody that know me, you know how much I love this game over the past year or two that I had been playing it in the past. So, first of all, this is listed under games in the App Store, so it is a mobile game. It is listed under games, and it is also on Nintendo Switch as a game that you can download. So this is, as a consensus that I came up with myself and my viewers, because I streamed this whole process of coming up with this top 10 live, and I consulted with a lot of people, and we came to the consensus that yes, Reba crane game should be considered a game for this list. Now, what it is, if you've never heard of it before, you control an interface through a video, like a game interface, where you have a webcam that is a live feed of hundreds of real-life crane games remotely in Japan. You're remotely controlling these crane games from your home, whether it's through your Switch, your PC browser, your phone, whatever. You're controlling these real crane games and trying to win prizes in real time, and if you win them, they ship them to your home. It's pretty genius. It was addicting as all heck, let me tell you. I'll just give a warning here, by the way. If you have a gambling problem, do not download this game. There are hundreds, probably thousands of people that struggle to get off of Reba, so this is actually a real warning. If you have a gambling addiction, heed my warning and do not download Reba. It can seriously be hard to get yourself off of this. And considering that prices to play, because it does cost real money, tokens that you have to buy to be able to play the game, because they're not going to ship you this stuff for free. They do ship it to you for free, but you do have to pay to win the stuff initially. But that's just a warning. So I streamed this game. The reason why I love this so much is it was a streaming experience. About a year ago, I was streaming this with my viewers, and man, did we have fun with it. We were watching other people play, people dumping like $100, $200 to try and win this like stuffed animal, and then they don't win it, and then I come in and I snipe it for $2 after they had been trying to win it for like the past 30 minutes. It was a heck of a lot of fun, and believe me, if you're a fan of crane games, this deserves your attention. It's just a little dangerous and a little pricey. I no longer play it because of how expensive it has become to play, but it was such a significant and memorable experience for me that I had to include it in this list. All right, coming in at number 8, Ni no Kuni. Now, Ni no Kuni was pretty much like a dream game for me. When I first heard of the announcement of Level 5 developing a JRPG in tandem with Studio Ghibli, which I was still am, but I used to be a fanatic of everything Studio Ghibli. So this was sort of like a dream project for me. And when it came true and released and actually lived up to the hype, I knew it had to be on this list somewhere. Now, I did burn myself out from playing Ni no Kuni a bit because I was going to 100% the game from start to finish, do every quest, do everything. I did get burnt out about 75% of the way through the game, but I felt that my initial experience with this, I truly believe that the first 10 or so hours, 10 to 15 hours with Ni no Kuni, are some of the most magical and memorable moments I have ever had with a video game. The first initial towns and dungeons that you go through in Ni no Kuni are so bursting with life and personality and colors and character, and not just in the environments, but the characters that you meet. Drippy as your little companion was such a lovable mascot to have with you on the journey. I love the combat system in the original Ni no Kuni. I know that's one of the most, love or hate aspects of the original Ni no Kuni, but I really enjoyed the sort of blend between real-time turn-based. I didn't really care for what they did with the sequel with Ni no Kuni. I thought it became a little bland and generic in some ways. Doesn't hold the candle to the original. But just the music from Joe Hisashi and the animated cutscenes from the studio, it's like, man, Ni no Kuni was pretty much everything I could have dreamed of in a game, and it came true, so it is on this list. Okay, number 7. This one is very important to me, and its inclusion also says a lot about me and how my time as a fan of video games has evolved over the past 10 years. So, if you don't know, I really don't play many shooting games anymore. I've kind of fallen out of love with first and third person shooters. The genre just doesn't really do much for me. However, the only series that has managed to keep my attention is the Uncharted series. Ever since the original, I have bought every single Uncharted game on day one of release, played it to completion within the span of about 1 or 2 days every time, and enjoyed the heck out of it. Uncharted 1, 2, 3, 4, Lost Legacy, Golden Abyss, every single one, play them to completion and absolutely love them, and Uncharted 4 was not an exception. What a great bookend to the Nathan Drake series of Uncharted games. It was the perfect ending. I sort of went through and reviewed a long play, kind of skipping around to try and remember like why I fell in love with this game so much, and just certain parts of the game, like the chase sequence with the motorcycle, for example, the villages that you encounter in this game. How I just remembered how much I spent like time just exploring and looking for little details and getting immersed in the world, and just how breakneck speed the game was. That it starts with a crazy heist scene, and then it kind of slows down into more of a stealth section, and then all of a sudden you're in another chase scene in a vehicle, and then you're pillaging a tomb with some of the most memorable puzzles I've played in a game. But the thing that's most important about this is, for me, now that I'm no longer really in the shooting games, and I've kind of drifted away from liking puzzles in games and things such as this, the fact that a game like Uncharted can still captivate me with puzzles. I look forward to the puzzles in Uncharted, whereas in most games I don't really look forward to brain teaser puzzles anymore. And the fact also as well that I haven't really been into shooters in general for the past 5 or 6 years, but I can still really enjoy Uncharted 4, means that this game needs to be in my top games for the decade. The series just means too much to me, and this was a great way to end a series that meant so much to me for a very large portion of my life. All right, number 6. Good old Final Fantasy 13. I know this one's going to anger a lot of people. They're like, how dare you put Final Fantasy 13 on your top 10 games of the decade? Look, I love Final Fantasy 13, and this stems all the way back. Look at my top 10 games of 2010 that I made back in the beginning of 2011. I named Final Fantasy 13 my favorite game of 2010. I still stand by it. I love 13. I've actually grown to appreciate it more over the years, now that I've like kind of invested time into learning the speedrun for this game and seeing the intricacies of the battle system. It really makes me come to appreciate this game even more than I ever did, because if you're not aware, the combat system in this game is actually extremely complicated and intricate. But you wouldn't really know that unless you really delved into it and looked into it outside of just the game's tutorials and even the strategy guide. The speedrun strategy guide opened my eyes to how far you can push Final Fantasy 13 in terms of the customization of your party and how you go about comboing in this game and killing things fast and increasing your damage, and really making me appreciate 13 more than I ever have since its release. I like everything about it. I love the characters. I love the story, as confusing as it may have been. The music is one of my favorite soundtracks in the history of games now. I do not mind the linearity of this game. I think that is sort of stressed a little bit too much, and the whole joke about the game not starting until you're 75% of the way through the game. I get it, look. But as a whole experience of creating a package of a compelling game that I felt compelled to see through to the end, um, I had to include it. And I understand if you don't like this game, because if you don't like the combat, you're probably not going to like the game. Or if you like the combat and you don't like any of the story or characters, look, I get it. But for me, this is one of the best RPGs ever made, and I stand by that. All right, number 5. This one may shock some people, but I had to include it. That is Hearthstone. Now, I no longer play Hearthstone. I haven't played Hearthstone in a few years, but this game was such an important part of my life from the previous decade that I couldn't not include this. It was the kind of game where for several years I was kind of encapsulated by it. Not only was I playing Hearthstone, but it eventually got to the point where I was watching other people play this game on Twitch and watching tournaments and following all the news surrounding Hearthstone, and even somewhat the esports scene of Hearthstone. And it was just like I'd wake up and have my cup of coffee. I'd just watch some people play Hearthstone, maybe play a few games myself, maybe watch an analysis video of some new cards that were coming out. And this is what I did for like several years, 2 or 3 years. It was more of a casual experience for me. I wasn't. I mean, there was a time where I was quite addicted to Hearthstone and doing nothing but playing Hearthstone. However, it's not higher on my list because I do realize that a lot of it was because I was addicted to the game, but that's also because it's a testament to just how good Hearthstone was. Yes, it is a digital card game that thrives on randomness and, not entirely all skill. There is a lot of randomness behind Hearthstone, but that's what made it fun. You don't necessarily have to have a game on the skill level of Magic the Gathering, where everything is skill based and intimidating for new players. Whereas Hearthstone is kind of just like, whatever. If you can win a match in the craziest way possible and have fun and laugh about it, that's Hearthstone in a nutshell. Just have fun, embrace the randomness, embrace the craziness, and as a whole package, I had a blast with Hearthstone. Even though I will never return to it, I have to recognize how significant this game was for me in the past 10 years. Well, you get the idea for the few years that I was playing it. Alrighty, this one is lower on my list than I would have thought, and that is The Elder Scrolls Skyrim. So you're probably like, oh my goodness, I expected that one to be maybe number 1. It's not. It's number 4. So Skyrim, very important game for me. Yes, I love Morrowind, I love Oblivion, but those obviously could not be considered for this list, so I had to go with Skyrim. I loved the world of Skyrim, still love it. And what kind of confirmed that for me was I recently played, recently about, what was it, a year or two ago when the PSVR version came out. I played Skyrim again in VR, and I just kind of fell in love with the world and its immersion all over again from start to finish. Being able to put myself into it in first-person view, fully in virtual reality, was like, man, could you imagine when you first played Skyrim and someone would have told you, okay, you're going to be playing this in virtual reality, in 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it was. You'd kind of be floored, right? And so having that experience with Skyrim kind of reminded me why I fell in love with this game in the first place, and that's because the world is expansive. I find Skyrim relaxing, just exploring, and I never forget moments where I'm just kind of up on a hill and I look out into the distance and I see a town that I can visit that takes me 5 or 10 minutes to run over to. And then you reach that said town, and maybe you pillage a little bit, steal some stuff, and find a dungeon off in the distance, kind of hidden in a little alcove, and you go down there. And sure, there may not be a fascinating story to go along with the dungeon, but you kind of make your own story as you go along, right? Like maybe you're more of a stealthy approach playing these kind of games, or maybe you just run and gun and kill everything. I had a lot of memories with dungeons that were not necessarily tied to any kind of lore, but more so the experience going through them, because I kind of forced myself to never lower the difficulty in this game. So, I had a lot of moments where I'd come up against something that was way above my skill level and just remembering how I tried to conquer it, and a lot of times often failing, and just embracing the beautiful nature and how organic and not so copy and paste most of the dungeons feel. The beginning hours of Skyrim for me are always still some of my most memorable experiences in a game of all time, especially sort of the opening dungeon as you're kind of delving through that with underground waterfalls and rivers and little scenarios and things set up within the dungeon, like mini things that you can completely pass over. But if you solve this little puzzle on how do you dodge these enemies that will probably overpower you so that you can sneak in and steal the chest, kind of thing, like stuff like that is just, that is Skyrim to me. Sort of making your own story when the main story itself may be lacking in some areas. It's more so how you choose to role play your character. Um, and I always found that the most fascinating aspect about Skyrim. And sure, the series gets a lot of much warranted discussion in terms of how glitchy it is and how imperfect it is in a lot of areas. But man, as a whole package, Skyrim, I went back and actually watched my initial impressions video that I made all those years ago and just listened to what I was saying about the game and trying to remember why this game was so important to me back then. And hey, that's why it's on the list. Maybe if you want more impressions on why it's here, go back and watch my old video from 2010 or 11. I don't remember when I posted that. All right, number 3, surprise, it's Journey. Journey was a contender for number 1, but ultimately I decided to put it in at number 3. Journey for me is sort of the pinnacle of small, bite-sized games that try to send a message in a meaningful way in terms of driving a game story forward through not so much a narrative with text, but interpretation of the story at hand without words. And that's the most magical thing about Journey is you feel so many emotions and you have so many memories with a game that has no words. There's no spoken words, there's no dialogue, no subtitles. Your time with Journey varies from person to person. My experience was one of the most memorable things that I ever experienced with a game. The revelation that you're playing this on day one and having that revelation that, oh my goodness, I just played through this game with a bunch of random strangers. That's revealed to you at the end of the game. And I've never really felt as connected to character in a game as I did with Journey, going through with a random person that I've never met and reaching the end of the game and getting separated, torn apart. It was like losing a loved one practically. I mean, that might be going a little bit far, but as as an analogy, that's the best thing I can come up with to kind of like convey this strange feeling that only Journey and no other game has ever come close to it has really evoked for me. I think the length of Journey was perfect as a sort of 2 to 3 hour game. A lot of people are like, it's so short, it's really not a full experience of the game. But no, not all games need to be long. I am a fan of short games these days. Heck, I will take a 5 hour game over something that's 50 hours. I just don't have time for that anymore. I love these small little bite-sized games, and Journey sort of was this benchmark. There have been so many games that have tried to emulate Journey, not just in sort of like that, okay, you're going to pair up with a random person, get to the end of the game kind of thing, but more so like these smaller, I love to call them artsy fartsy games, and I don't mean that in any kind of demeaning way. I just use it as a way to kind of describe a sort of like subgenre that has cropped up over the past decade of these games that are very art focused with minimal words and kind of trying to draw emotions from you. Many games have tried to draw emotion from the player, but few succeed like Journey. And a game that I feel has never been quite matched in terms of how I felt from beginning to end, especially at the end of my time playing, I felt deserved to be on this list, and I've received a lot of replay from Journey. It was the kind of game where after I finished it for the first time, I felt compelled to go back and play it many more times. Help new players. I wanted to find people that have never played the game before and help them through as a white robe, because you can kind of visually see in this game when you've completed it a certain amount of times. And man, Journey was pretty defining for me from the past decade, and very deserving of top 3. All right, now here's what I would probably consider to be the biggest shocker in this list in terms of a game you probably would not expect to see. this high up. And this was a last minute decision. This used to be a little bit lower in my list, but once I started reminiscing and really reflecting on why I love this game so much and why it was so important to me, not just as a game, but like for a better part of my life, how much hours I've invested into this game, I said I can't put this any lower than number 2. And that game is Smite. Now this might shock some of you because I've never really talked about Smite too much on my YouTube channel over the years when I was playing it. I made a separate YouTube channel for Smite, but that's another story. I didn't really follow through with that too much. But Smite, I played Smite. Smite, first of all, is a MOBA. It is a third-person action MOBA, so it's not a top-down MOBA. I've never played League of Legends, okay? Just as a precursor to my experience with Smite. Smite was my first true MOBA, and what kind of drew me to it originally was I saw it at a PAX pre-release. I don't remember what year it was, but it was many, many years ago, and I saw this game, and I'm like, wow, I love the viewpoint. I love that it's third person, sort of like, an action game. It kind of really kind of drew me in. I like the theme behind the different pantheons of gods that you can play as, and I'm like, wow, this looks really cool. And it took a few months before I was able to get into the beta, but I played Smite since its inception, before they released a single new god that you can play as. I was with Smite since the beginning, and I played it for several years. I haven't played it in quite a bit, but one of these days I would like to go back and return to it. But for several years, I was playing Smite pretty much every day. Several thousand hours in this game. This is on the level of Final Fantasy 11 or SOCOM for me in terms of like hours invested into this game. Was I addicted? Absolutely. But I was addicted because it's a darn good game. Like, this is a good video game. It's not just because it's a MOBA and you get addicted to it. Like, sure, that plays a role in deciding how high up I put it on this list. However, it's not just because how many hours I put in. It's because it's a good game. Smite was completely skill based in terms of like you need to aim everything you do in this game. Everything you do is a skill shot, and I really love that about Smite. I played it with my real life friends. It pretty much became a part of my life, getting together with my friends and playing it every night and playing all the different game modes and wrecking the noobs. And I played this game so much and became so recognized for my skill with certain gods in this game, such as Bastet and Cabrakan. I was sort of known for innovating in certain game modes, mostly Arena, Siege, 3 versus 3, etc., and Domination, which is no longer a game mode in here. But I became known for innovating and becoming so good at certain gods in this game that when I would play certain game modes, and if people saw me in the lobby, they would actually start banning gods that were considered weak by most people, considered like bottom of the barrel. But I was able to innovate these gods in a way that people started to know me because of my innovations, and they'd start banning them so I couldn't choose them. And I'm like, wow, like, it's kind of crazy that I had sort of a stamp for a period of time on the Smite community and the Smite meta in certain game modes in this. I was pretty damn good at this game, okay? I put a lot of hours into it and had so much fun, so many memories. And initially why it was lower, because I hadn't reminisced about it yet. I kind of put it on my list. I'm like, all right, I know this needs to be on here. And then I started having a discussion with my chat on Twitch. I started reminiscing with other people that had played it, started reminiscing with friends that I had played it with, and all these memories just started hitting me like a tidal wave. And I'm like, holy moly, Smite, how I love you so much and how I miss you. And my goodness, I'm going to put you at number 2 on my list because it deserves to be there. Alrighty. The time has come. You're all probably having these wild thoughts racing through your minds. What is number 3? Well, unfortunately this year I don't have a copy of Red Dead Redemption 2 to troll you with and throw across my room. However, it is a game that is the third in a series. It's well loved. It is not The Witcher 3. It is, of course, and I've spoken very little of this on my YouTube channel since it released, and I know I've left some of you in the dark, and you're probably wondering, did it live up to the hype? It lived up to the hype. The Last Guardian. My Trico plush will be here to announce this one with me. The Last Guardian is my favorite game of the decade, and I thought it was a pretty clear decision for me for a while. Smite and Journey did come close to actually taking this. At a couple times there were moments where I was considering Journey, maybe Smite, but I'm like, nah, it's got to be Last Guardian. So Last Guardian, you got to remember one thing, okay? Why this game is my number 1. Eco, favorite game of all time? Probably still is. All right, a lot of you know that about me. Last Guardian is pretty much the closest thing to the sequel of Eco. You might be like, but what about Shadow of the Colossus? Shadow of the Colossus is so different from Eco. Yes, it's in the same universe, same developers, but I really feel like The Last Guardian is Eco 2. It's probably the closest we're ever going to get to Eco 2, mostly because of how the game plays in terms of environmental designs, the platforming, the exploration. Yes, there's Trico, which is sort of a big wrench thrown into the game, but he's sort of like an evolved version of Yorda. This is pretty much Eco 2, and my consensus is it absolutely lived up to the hype and the wait, and in some ways exceeded the hype and the wait that I had for this game. And we're talking a long wait. We first found out about The Last Guardian in 2009 with the first trailer that they released. And, for years before that, us fans of Eco and Shadow of the Colossus knew that something was in development, but we didn't know what. So for the better part of a decade, practically, if you're including the years that were leading up to the announcement of The Last Guardian, because we knew something was coming, that's like almost a third of my life. I've been teased and baited into waiting for this game, thinking it was coming, hearing rumors that it was canceled, having to wait years between trailers. Like, it was an emotional journey waiting for this game. So emotional, in fact, that when the release of The Last Guardian finally came, and this has never happened to me before with any game, I sit down, I boot up the game, and I start crying like a child at the title screen. The title screen for The Last Guardian. I was just overwhelmed with such joy and relief and disbelief that after all these years, it's here. It was on my TV and I'm about ready to play it, and I just couldn't control myself. The emotions just overwhelmed me. And, that is an example, kind of tells you the state of mind that I was in with The Last Guardian and why it is so, is my number one game of the decade. Crying at the title screen, and after getting started with the game and realizing, holy moly, they pulled this off. My biggest regret with it was playing it on a PS4 as opposed to a PS4 Pro, which I did not have at the time because it did have performance issues. But other than that, the game was perfect, pretty much, almost to me. The only thing I also didn't like was the constant reminder of the controls in the tutorial that played throughout the game. It was like, come on, we know how to play. We know how to jump. You don't got to tell me 5 hours into the game how to jump. But anyway, other than those nitpicks, I loved it. I know a lot of people complained about, and listen, The Last Guardian, I understand. I understand if you don't like it. I completely understand. It's not a game for everybody. The biggest complaint is that Trico's AI was like frustrating and he didn't listen, but to me, Trico felt like a real animal. Trico felt like, hey, I'm giving you commands, why you're not listening. And for those of you that own animals that maybe don't listen to you all the time, or have owned them in the past, or I think you can relate a little bit more with The Last Guardian potentially. And I really felt connected to Trico, and I think that was the most important part, because you go on this journey once again with very little story, very little story advancement, so that by the end of the game, and the fact that you actually care about Trico and what happens to Trico because of this journey that you've had with him simply through interaction, really spoke to me, and I think they pulled it off perfectly. I also wasn't a fan of the fact that there was narration throughout the whole game, but that's I can make a whole. I should really make my own video on The Last Guardian separately one of these days. I don't want to go on too long about it, but all you need to know is that it met and exceeded my expectations in that long wait. It's pretty much the direct sequel mechanically to my favorite game of all time, so that has a lot of weight behind it. And yeah, I mean, I played it multiple times since it came out, most recently as well. I just played it, not even a year ago, and I still love the darn game. So I think it's pretty much cemented. Rico has won and upset a lot of people. That Lost Guardian is probably my number one game of all time. But if you know me, you kind of saw that coming from a mile away, right? Well, anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed my my top 10, which is probably going to cause a lot of ruckus, but feel free to let me know down in the comments how wrong I am about my top 10 games of all time, or better yet, come stop by my Twitch channel. I stream there almost every day. You can tell me, hey, I completely agree with one of these games being on your list, or heck, I do not agree with such and such game on your list. Come let me know. We can have a discussion in real time rather than just through a comment. So thank you very much for watching. Trico says goodbye, and hopefully I'll see you soon in another video.